So a really popular question that I get from a lot of my clients is, where should I part my hair and what shape of a part should I be using? And of course, like I always say, the most important thing that matters is the image that you're striving for, and at the end of the day, it's just a hair part, so you can choose to style your hair differently every single day if you want to. But knowing that there's a relationship between different part styles and your facial proportions, I hope will shed some new light onto how you choose to style your hair every day. So here are some things that you might want to consider in choosing the ideal hair part for yourself. The first thing you want to consider, like I said, is the overall image that you're going for. A middle part tends to come across as a little bit more natural and less done up, because it's kind of how your hair falls naturally when you just let your hair down, right? So it doesn't look very styled, and it's a good choice if you're going for that chic and effortless look. A side part, on the other hand, adds more volume to the hair, so it makes the hair look a little bit more glamorous, and it also looks more styled. So a side part can be a good choice if you're going for more of that glamorous, polished, and mature look. Obviously, there are so many other elements like how wavy or curly or straight your hair is, the overall texture, or how tousled or sleek you style the hair. All of these factors matter in determining the overall image of the hairstyle. Now, if we were to talk about who should be avoiding which style of parts, obviously you can do what you want, but to explain some proportional effects, a middle part generally covers both sides of the hairline, and that's not really ideal if you have a small forehead, because you just end up covering more surface area of the forehead with your hair. And it also makes the hair volume appear really flat at the top of the head, so that's not really ideal if you have a very low cranial top. A straight middle part right down the middle of the face also draws the attention directly down the longest section of the face, so that's not really ideal if you have a long face, and this also tends to highlight the asymmetry of the face a little bit more. A side part, on the other hand, will expose the sides of the hairline, so that might not be so ideal if you have a receding or an M-shaped hairline, but this really depends on the actual size of the forehead. For example, if you have a small forehead, but your M-shaped hairline makes the sides of the forehead appear higher, then exposing the highest points of your hairline with your part might actually bring more proportional balance to the face. A side part also tends to add more volume at the top of the head, which is not ideal if you already have a high cranial top, because that's gonna make the size of the head appear even larger than it already appears. You might also want to avoid a deep side part if you have a long face, because the added volume at the top ends up lengthening the head more, and especially the forehead. So if you have a long face, or if you have a high forehead, or if you have both, then a deep side part is just going to accentuate those factors even more. So now let's talk about how do we then wear each part style based on our proportions. If you have a small or a low forehead, a side part is generally considered more ideal, but what actually really matters is how you style your hair along the hairline. Adding some root volume along the hairline by lifting the roots, whether with a middle part or a side part, is going to help lengthen the forehead, because our eyes will follow the direction of the hair roots. And this is why I said a side part is generally considered more ideal if you have a small forehead, because it makes it easier to add the root volume along the hairline. But even with the middle part, you can absolutely add more hairline volume. And another thing you can do is you can tuck your hair behind the ears so the hair doesn't cover so much surface area of the forehead. So the key things to remember if you have a small or low forehead is paying extra attention to the root volume along your hairline, and not letting the hair cover so much surface area of the forehead. Now, if you have a big or a high forehead, the opposite tips will apply. So you will want to cover as much hairline as possible, and a middle part is generally more effective at that, but you could also use an off-center part or just a moderate side part to cover both sides of your hairline. And you'd probably want to choose styles that press down the hairline volume as much as possible. So you might want to avoid a very deep side part, but it could still work if you pay extra attention to the hairline volume and make sure that it's really pressed down, kind of like in a side swept bang style. So if you have a big or a high forehead, like I said, you just want to reverse the tips that I shared for small or low foreheads. Now, if you have a low cranial top, It is a feature that often comes with a high forehead because as the hairline recedes back, the height of the crown just appears lower from the frontal view, but that's not always the case. So just remember that there is a relationship between the height of your forehead and the height of your crown, but they don't always go hand in hand. And in these cases, you want to prioritize styles that can add more crown volume. So a side part is generally more effective at that. But if you have a low cranial top and you really want to wear a middle part, try using a curved or a zigzag shape in the part rather than a straight shape. And that's going to help with adding more volume near the crown area. I do have an older video where I talk about the effects of different hairline shapes and the height of the cranial top. So I'll link that video up here if you're interested. Now, if you have a high cranial top, again, this is a feature that often comes hand in hand with a low forehead. People like Sophia Richie or Hailey Bieber are really great examples of those with a low forehead and a high cranial top, but it's not always the case. And for these cases, you want to find styles that can press down the root volume around the crown as much as possible. So a middle part is generally more effective at that. And you want to use a straight shape over a curved or a zigzag shape in the part. And again, I do have another reference video for high cranial tops, which I'll link up here. And in that video, I talk a little bit more about the difference between hairline volume and crown volume. So if you're interested, definitely make sure to check it out afterwards. Now, when it comes to the length of the face, if you have a long face, like I said, a middle part is going to draw a line straight down the center of the face. And one of the reasons for that is because the shape of the part is straight. So you might want to opt for a curved or a zigzag shape in the part instead. Or you could also use a slightly off-center part to make sure the longest section of the face isn't highlighted as much. And that's also a great tip if you are concerned about your facial asymmetry. Again, you want to avoid a very deep side part because that's going to add too much volume and height to the top of the head that lengthens the face more. So the things to remember if you have a long face are to avoid a straight line in the part and avoid adding too much height to the top of the head. On the other hand, if you have a short face, then again, the opposite tips will apply. So a straight part right down the middle of the face is going to help with lengthening the face more, and covering both sides of the face with a middle part will add a narrowing and therefore lengthening effect to the face. And this tip also applies if you have a wide face or very wide outer fifths. Now, side part can still be styled in a way that covers one side of the face entirely, and that could also add a narrowing effect on the face by framing that one side. And this is a good tip if you're concerned about facial asymmetry as well. In my previous video on wide outer fifths, I've touched on all of these points, so I'll link it up here. Now, opposite to a wide face, if you have a very narrow face, then the tips are going to be similar to the tips for long faces. And you want to prioritize styles that can add more width. So rather than the part position, pay more attention to styling the hair outwards in a way that can add more side volume. And again, a very deep side part is going to add more height to the top of the head, and that's going to accentuate the narrowness of the face even more. If we use myself as an example, I have a slightly long face, but I also have wide outer fifths, and I do have a little bit of facial asymmetry, especially in the masseters area. Like my right masseter is quite a bit larger than my left one. And when it comes to my style preferences, I tend to opt for more natural and effortless styles. So my choice when it comes to how I usually part my hair is I'll choose an off-center part, and I usually wear a slightly curved shape in the part as well, although it kind of depends on the day. The height of my cranial top isn't particularly low, but I do have a bit of a longer philtrum and a pointy chin, so drawing more attention up is always a good idea for me. And with the curved part, I'll just curve the hair towards the left so that more hair can fall onto the right side of my face with the wider masseter. So that's kind of my go-to style, and I'll obviously change things up depending on the day, on my mood, and on the occasion, etc. But things I remember to avoid are a straight part right down the middle of my face and a deep side part that can add too much volume at the top of the head. Now, with a side part, another really popular question that I get all the time is, which side should I part my hair? And the answer is choose your best side. A side part aligns with one side of the eyes, and it naturally draws more attention to that side of the face, which is why I said you should choose your good or better side. A fun fact is that apparently most people think their left side is the good side. I'm not sure how true that is, but it's true for me. So the next time you style your hair, I hope you think about all of these points that we touched on today, and I'll see you in my next video. Until then, stay unique and stay gorgeous.